Imagine two seemingly completely unrelated pictures. In one, a flawlessly coiffed 1950s American housewife elegantly flips an egg on a frying pan to which absolutely nothing sticks. In the other, stern military engineers in lead aprons at the top-secret Oak Ridge complex are trying to separate uranium isotopes to create the first atomic bomb in human history, capable of wiping entire cities off the face of the Earth. What do they have in common? Paradoxically, both the perfect breakfast and the nuclear apocalypse were made possible by the exact same white powder, accidentally discovered in a gas cylinder sawed in half. Today, we are going to talk about polytetrafluoroethylene, or, as you know it, Teflon. And believe me, the history of this material is not just a story about humanity wanting to wash fewer dishes. It is a thriller about corporate ambitions, billion-dollar budgets, military secrets, and, unfortunately, the price we pay for our everyday comfort. If you caught the last episode, you probably remember the story of DuPont, General Motors, and their joint venture, Kinetic Chemicals, which gave the world the life-saving, and later proved disastrous, Freon. Well, our story today begins in the exact same setting. The year is 1938. Humanity is already actively cooling its food in refrigerators, but DuPont, being a classic corporate giant, has no plans to rest on its laurels. They are looking for new, even more efficient, and cheaper refrigerants, so they don't have to pay patent royalties to competitors. In a DuPont laboratory in New Jersey, a 27-year-old chemist named Roy Plunkett is hard at work. He was assigned a seemingly entirely routine task: to experiment with a gas called tetrafluoroethylene, TFE. The task was simple: synthesize this gas, pump it into cylinders, cool it with dry ice, and see how it reacts with other substances. On the morning of April 6, 1938, Plunkett and his assistant, Jack Reebok, walk up to a chilled cylinder. They open the valve to release some gas, but nothing happens. The gas doesn't flow. Plunkett checks the valve. It isn't clogged. He weighs the cylinder, and that's when the magic happens. The weight indicates that the gas is inside, but it won't come out. Anyone else might have just chalked it up to a defective valve, thrown the cylinder away, and gone to grab a coffee. But Plunkett was a meticulous chemist. They take a hacksaw and simply saw the cylinder in half. And they discover that there is no gas inside. The inner walls of the cylinder are coated with a strange, white, slippery-to-the-touch powder. Just think about this moment. No stroke of genius. No decades of purposeful research for a non-stick coating. The gas molecules, under the influence of pressure and the iron walls of the cylinder acting as a catalyst, simply link themselves together spontaneously into long chains. Spontaneous polymerization had occurred. Plunkett begins to study this white powder and realizes he has stumbled upon something incredible. This material did not dissolve in any known acid or solvent. It did not melt at wild temperatures. It did not conduct electricity. And, most amazingly, absolutely nothing stuck to it. It was the slipperiest material known to humanity at the time. In layman's terms, Plunkett had created a plastic where the carbon skeleton was tightly shielded by fluorine atoms. And the carbon-fluorine bond is one of the strongest in organic chemistry. It is practically impossible to break. In 1941, DuPont patents this material under the trademark Teflon. You'd think this was it, success. Now they'll crank out frying pans and make billions. But, as is always the case in the world of high technology, no miracle happened. The production of Teflon turned out to be incredibly, catastrophically expensive. This wasn't like brewing cellophane from wood pulp. The TFE gas used to make Teflon was explosive, and the polymerization process itself required highly complex equipment. Manufacturing everyday items out of Teflon in the early 40s would have been like carving toothpicks out of solid gold. DuPont management scratched their heads, shelved the patent, and started thinking about who they could sell this ultra-expensive but utterly invulnerable material to. In 1942, the Manhattan Project kicks off in the U.S., a top-secret program to create nuclear weapons. One of the most difficult technical challenges of the project was uranium enrichment. To separate the uranium-235 isotope needed for the bomb from uranium-238, scientists turned the uranium into a gas, uranium hexafluoride. And here lay a massive problem. Uranium hexafluoride is one of the most aggressive and corrosive substances in the universe. This gas literally ate through everything it touched: pipes, valves, and gaskets at the K-25 plant in Oak Ridge were dissolving in a matter of days. A leak of this gas meant death for the personnel and the failure of the entire nuclear program. General Leslie Groves, the head of the project, needed a material for pipes and gaskets that could withstand this hellish chemical cocktail. And then someone from the military remembers that the DuPont Corporation, which, by the way, was one of the main contractors for the Manhattan Project, has some sort of miracle plastic that doesn't react with anything. The military comes to DuPont and says, "We need your Teflon. Price doesn't matter. We are paying with taxpayers' money." And just like that, thanks to unlimited government funding, Teflon production is scaled up. Teflon gaskets and valves are installed at the gaseous diffusion plant. The uranium hexafluoride is securely contained in the pipes, and the U.S. successfully builds the atomic bomb. In short, Teflon went through a baptism by fire at the highest level. But in 1945, the war ends. Military contracts dry up, and DuPont is left with massive production capacities and a material that still costs an absolute fortune. They desperately needed to find a civilian application for it. In the late 40s, Teflon slowly began to be used in industry, for cable insulation, since it doesn't conduct current, for industrial bearings, and pipes in chemical plants. But this was all in the B2B sector, and the real money, as we know, lies on supermarket shelves. The year is 1954. Marc Gregoire, a French engineer, loves fishing. But one thing drives him absolutely crazy. His telescopic fishing rods constantly jam, and the line gets tangled. Gregoire, being a technically minded person, learns about the American Teflon somewhere along the way. He orders a bit of this material and develops a technology to apply a microscopically thin layer of Teflon to his fishing gear. The fishing line begins to glide perfectly. Gregoire is incredibly proud of himself. He is sitting at home, polishing his fishing rods, when his wife Colette approaches him. The story goes that she looked at this miracle material and said, "Mark, your fishing rods are wonderful, of course, but couldn't you put this slippery stuff on my aluminum frying pans? I'm tired of scraping burnt oil off them." And this is where Marc Gregoire really had to sweat. Because herein lies the main physical paradox of Teflon. Think about it. If Teflon is the slipperiest material in the world, to which nothing sticks, then how on earth do you make the Teflon itself stick to the frying pan? It took Gregoire an enormous amount of time to solve this problem. Simply put, he came up with the idea of etching the surface of the aluminum pan with acid, creating microscopic pores and craters on it. Then he rubbed Teflon powder into it and baked it at 400 degrees Celsius. The Teflon melted, locking itself dead on into these microcraters like tree roots into the earth, and the pan became non-stick. In 1956, Marc Gregoire patents his technology and creates the company Tefal. The name is a combination of the words Teflon and aluminium. In its very first year, 1 million frying pans are sold in France. Housewives are ecstatic. No more pouring liters of oil, no more soaking dishes overnight. And what about the Americans? The Americans, specifically the DuPont Company, looked at this European triumph and realized they were missing out on a gold mine. By the early 60s, DuPont refines its application technology, and in 1961, the Happy Pan appears on the American market. It was a sensation. Advertising posters showing a perfect fried egg sliding right off the pan onto a plate drove people crazy. Teflon became a symbol of the American dream, of progress, and of liberating women from kitchen slavery. Soon, irons, waffle makers, and baking sheets were coated with Teflon. By the 1990s, Teflon cookware was in 90% of kitchens in the developed world. The Dark Side of the Pan, C8 and the Conspiracy of Silence. At this point, we could roll the credits, say thank you to the DuPont Corporation for our happy, burnt porridge-free childhoods, and go our separate ways. But, as I said earlier, the history of major innovations is rarely cloudless. And here begins the darkest part of our story. Let's return to the paradox that the Frenchman Grégoire struggled with. How do you make a non-stick material stick? Yes, the microcrater method worked, but for industrial, mass, and perfectly smooth application of liquid Teflon to metal, corporations needed a surfactant, a special emulsifier. Simply put, a chemical that would allow the Teflon molecules not to clump together, but to distribute evenly in water, forming a suspension. And such a substance was found. It was called perfluorooctanoic acid, abbreviated as PFOA or simply C8 because of its chain of 8 carbon atoms. And do you know who invented this substance in 1947? You won't believe it, but it was our old friends again, the 3M Company, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company, the same one that gave the world masking tape and Post-it notes. DuPont started buying C8 from 3M by the trainload. This substance was the perfect catalyst. It was added to the Teflon manufacturing process, made its application smooth, and then, as it was claimed, most of the C8 simply evaporated when the pans were baked. The Teflon empire grew, factories smoked, and money flowed like a river. But there was one critical nuance. Unlike ordinary organic substances that degrade in nature over time, C8, just like Teflon itself, contained that super-strong carbon-fluorine bond. This substance did not break down. Not from the sun, not from water, not from bacteria. It was eternal, and it was toxic. Starting in the 1950s, DuPont began receiving alarming internal reports. Workers at the Washington Works plant in Parkersburg, West Virginia, where Teflon was produced, started getting sick. Pregnant employees were giving birth to children with defects. Secret research was conducted inside the corporation, showing that the C8 chemical accumulated in the blood, caused enlarged livers in lab rats, and most likely provoked cancer. What does a responsible corporation do upon receiving such data? Exactly. In a perfect world, it shuts down production. But Teflon was bringing DuPont billions of dollars in profit every year, and they made a decision. Classic for businesses of that era. They classified the data. Production waste containing C8 was pumped into underground wells, dumped into the Ohio River, and released into the atmosphere for decades. The toxic substance began to seep into the water supply of Parkersburg, and if you think that the 3M Company was kept in the dark, you are mistaken. 3M, as the manufacturer of this chemical, also conducted tests, also knew about its bioaccumulation, meaning the substance builds up in the body and is not excreted, and also kept silent, continuing to supply it to DuPont. This conspiracy of silence lasted almost 50 years. Just think about that number. For half a century, humanity flipped pancakes while livestock slowly died off around one of the factories, and local residents suffered from oncology. The fall of C8 and the illusion of change. The storm only broke in 1998, when corporate lawyer Rob Bilott, approached by a local Parkersburg farmer whose herd of cows had died in agony, started digging into the case. Billet initiated a lawsuit against DuPont, which snowballed into the largest environmental investigation in history. During the trials, which lasted over a decade, by the way, there is an excellent movie about this called Dark Waters. Billet forced DuPont to open its internal archives, and the world was horrified. It turned out that the C8 chemical had spread so widely that its traces can now be found in the blood of 99% of people on planet Earth, including infants, and even in the blood of polar bears in the Arctic. Due to its chemical structure, C8 entered the global water cycle and became what scientists now call forever chemicals. The heat was turned up so high that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, stepped in. Under the pressure of irrefutable evidence, lawsuits, and multi-million-dollar fines, DuPont and other chemical giants were forced to back down. In 2000, 3M announced it was voluntarily phasing out the production of C8. DuPont tried to produce it themselves, but ultimately, by 2015, under pressure from the public and regulators, they were forced to completely eliminate perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA/C8, from the Teflon production process. Does this mean Teflon is gone? No. The finished polytetrafluoroethylene, PTFE, itself, the polymer the coating is made of, is considered completely inert and safe, provided, of course, that you don't heat the pan above 300 degrees Celsius, 570 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point the plastic begins to break down and release toxic gases, which, by the way, are guaranteed to kill pet parrots. The problem was specifically in the production process and the emulsifier. Today, corporations use other substances to produce non-stick coatings. C8 was replaced by the Gen X technology. Chemists simply tweaked the molecular structure a bit, making the chain shorter. Companies swear up and down that now everything is eco-friendly, safe, and quickly leaves the body. But independent studies in recent years show that Gen X possesses practically the exact same toxic properties as its predecessor. The wheel of samsara has made another turn. We tried to get away from corrosive uranium hexafluoride and toxic C8, but it seems we just swapped one chemical acronym for another, continuing to accumulate forever polymers in nature. Today, you can increasingly find ceramic-coated cookware on store shelves, positioned as a safe alternative to Teflon. It's funny that, in essence, it's just a high-tech variation of the clay pottery that humanity used for thousands of years before Roy Plunkett sawed his ill-fated cylinder in half. The history of Teflon is a perfect cross-section of the 20th century. From an accidental miracle in a test tube and a helping hand in creating the most destructive weapon, to the status of a symbol of domestic coziness and, ultimately, a global environmental catastrophe. Every time we want a magic pill, or, in this case, a magic frying pan to which nothing sticks, we are sooner or later handed the bill. And as the story with the DuPont company shows, this bill sometimes has to be paid by multiple generations.